Have you ever just looked out at a massive, beautiful stretch of wilderness and wondered what exactly is hiding in those shadows? Well, welcome to The Explainer. I am so excited to have you here today because we are embarking on a truly wild journey. We're going to be exploring the breathtaking state of Idaho, but we're looking at it through a very specific lens today. So let's dive right in. We're going to examine the dual nature of Idaho's gorgeous, yet incredibly unforgiving landscape. I mean, from the jagged peaks of the Sawtooth Mountains to these deep, entirely silent forests, this is a place totally shaped by wilderness and distance. And, where there's deep wilderness, there are always deep mysteries.
Every state has a dark corner. This single quote absolutely hits the nail on the head for what we're looking at today. We are venturing straight into the forgotten mysteries, the totally eerie folklore, and the strange legends of America's rugged Northwest. So, what is it about this specific terrain that inspires such chilling campfire tales? And more importantly, what happens when the darkness isn't just a myth? Chapter 1: Idaho's Darker Side, the Folklore of the Land.
You see, massive, isolated environments like Idaho's, they are literally the perfect breeding ground for campfire tales, and they have been for centuries. When we're faced with untamed land, harsh weather, and profound isolation, we naturally create stories to explain the unexplainable. To really understand this, we have to look at Spirit Lake, which the Kootenai tribe translated as Tessamini or Lake of the Spirits. The legend here goes that a hostile chief named Yellow Serpent actually threatened war unless he could marry the beautiful Hyapam. To avert a totally bloody conflict, her father consented. But Hyapam was deeply in love with a brave named Shining Eagle. So in this heartbreaking act of romantic tragedy, the two lovers bound themselves together with a marriage chain of rushes and leaped from Suicide Cliff straight into the lake. Their bodies were never found. And what makes this moody, haunting mystery even more chilling? Geologists say Spirit Lake is actually one of the only lakes in the entire world with a completely sealed bottom. Folklore insists that when the ice melts in the spring, those weird, mournful sounds echoing across the water are actually their cries.
Chapter 2: Monsters in the Water, Cryptids of the Deep.
Okay, so as we move from the shorelines to the state's really deep, dark waters, the local legends kind of shift. They evolve from ancient spirits to these massive, unexplained physical beasts just lurking below the surface. Just to do a quick level set here, a cryptid is defined as an animal or creature whose existence or survival is disputed or just unsubstantiated by science. Think Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, right? In Idaho, the geography, specifically these incredibly deep glacially carved lakes, provides literally the perfect habitat for these types of aquatic legends.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how these two completely distinct legends illustrate the incredible breadth of Idaho's water folklore. Take Charlie of Payette Lake, for example. First reported by a logging crew way back in 1920 as just this undulating log, a mass sighting later in 1944 described Charlie as a 40-foot creature with a dinosaur-type head and camel-like humps. I mean, it even made national headlines in Time magazine. Then, contrast that with the much older Bear Lake monster down on the Idaho-Utah border, dating all the way back to the 1860s. This creature was described by pioneer Joseph C. Rich as a powerful, 50-foot serpent moving incredibly swiftly through the water. So we've got two distinct regions and two entirely different aquatic beasts.
Chapter 3: Eerie Local Legends, Shadows and Spirits.
Let's shift our focus from the deep waters back to the shorelines and old structures of Idaho, moving a bit closer to modern-day hauntings. These legends are completely intertwined with the history of the locations themselves. Just imagine walking the empty halls of Pocatello High School, a building that's been around since 1892. Back in 2014, security cameras actually captured a hazy figure moving down a corridor and triggering motion-activated lights. It was wild enough to catch the attention of national ghost hunters. Then there are the water babies of Massacre Rocks along the Snake River. It's a deeply chilling Shoshone-Bannock tradition where visitors report hearing actual infant cries and seeing small figures just beneath the water's surface. Finally, look at the Seven Devils Mountains. Nez Perce tradition describes powerful spirits guarding the high country, and early settlers would later report spectral figures walking those unforgiving, jagged ridgelines. The history and the hauntings, they're really one and the same. But, this brings us to a much darker thought. What happens when the monsters in the woods are actually real? As we transition into the true crime segment of our explainer today, we really have to leave the whimsical folklore behind. We are entering a somber, deeply respectful reality where the danger is not some phantom canoe or a lake serpent, but something entirely tangible. Chapter 4: Vanished in the Wild, Swallowed by the Landscape.
So, the crucial point we need to understand is that the exact same unforgiving landscape that birthed those beautiful and terrifying myths has also been the site of very real, chilling disappearances. The vastness of Idaho can hide a lot of secrets. It is terrifying to realize just how quickly someone can vanish in this environment without a single trace. I mean, think about turning your back for just 5 minutes. In 2015, 2.5-year-old Dior Coons Jr. vanished from the remote Timber Creek campground in exactly that time frame, just 5 to 20 minutes. Despite a massive search operation, not even his little oversized cowboy boots were ever found. Back in 1993, 9-year-old Stephanie Crane walked away from a bowling alley in Chalice and practically vanished into thin air. A suspicious yellow pickup truck with red pinstripes was seen nearby, but was never identified. And in 1999, 25-year-old theater student Will Hendrick vanished after a party in Moscow, Idaho. His car was found later, heavily muddied, with the driver's seat pushed far back, as if someone much taller had been driving it. 3 totally different people, swallowed entirely by the landscape.
And that brings us to the timeline of 26-year-old Terrence Woods Jr., which is honestly one of the most baffling in recent history. He was an experienced TV production assistant who had worked in really remote parts of Alaska and Turkey. Terrence was out filming deep in the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest. He called his father on October 5th, but then strangely texted hours later saying he was coming home early because his mother needed surgery, which absolutely wasn't true. According to the TV crew he was with, at 5:30 p.m., Terrence just dropped his walkie-talkie and sprinted down a steep cliff right into the wilderness. The crew waited over an hour to call 911, claiming he was having an anxiety attack. Despite search dogs, helicopters, and infrared tech, absolutely no trace of him was ever found. But here's where it gets truly baffling, guys. The crew's narrative of this unstable, confused young man completely contradicts his family's knowledge of him as a calm, seasoned professional. It leaves his father with agonizing questions, genuinely doubting if Terrence ever even made it to the Idaho woods that day.
Chapter 5: Unsolved Cold Cases. The Killers Among Us. We now have to transition to cases where the wilderness wasn't to blame at all. Rather, it was individuals who used the sheer isolation of small Idaho towns to commit heinous acts and totally escape justice. Back in September 1951, the small logging town of Wapee felt entirely safe. Kids hitched rides all the time. But 12-year-old Lonnie Jones never made it home from the Lumberjack Days Fair. 5 days later, a logger found his body hidden in the roadside brush off Highway 12. He was bound, blindfolded, and murdered. The highly deliberate nature of the crime absolutely shocked the community. But despite several tips coming in, no arrests were ever made. Lonnie tragically became a forgotten victim from a bygone era. 11. That is the number of months that police actively dismissed the disappearance of 14-year-old Linda Smith as just a runaway situation back in 1981. They stubbornly maintained this theory while completely ignoring her 9-year-old brother, Ben. Ben had actually woken up in the middle of the night, fought with a man in his 30s who was dragging his sister out of their house, and watched her get thrown into a van with flames painted on the side. But because of the family's poverty, this child eyewitness wasn't taken seriously at all, and crucial forensic evidence wasn't even collected. 11 months later, Linda's skeletal remains were finally found. That agonizing delay cost them the case, and her killer remains free to this day. Let's look at how these events escalated, because these disappearances were not isolated. Between 1979 and 1982, a horrifying string of violence plagued the Lewis-Clark Valley. It started when 12-year-old Christina White vanished after the Asotin County Fair Parade. Then, in 1981, University of Idaho senior Kristen David was murdered while biking on Highway 95. Her dismembered remains were later found wrapped in newspaper in the Snake River. A year after that, stepsisters Christina Nelson and Jacqueline Miller, along with theater janitor Stephen Pearsall, all vanished on the exact same night near the Lewiston Civic Theater. Nelson and Miller's remains were discovered in 1984, while Pearsall was never seen again. Eventually, law enforcement realized these absolutely weren't just isolated tragedies. All 5 victims are tightly linked geographically. Even more chilling, investigators eventually zeroed in on one unnamed suspect who happened to be an employee at the Lewiston Civic Theater the very night Pearsall, Nelson, and Miller vanished. In a staggering coincidence, police also realized this same suspect lived right near a house tied to 12-year-old Christina White's disappearance in 1979. Yet, despite the heavy involvement of both the Idaho State Police and the FBI, the evidence remains largely circumstantial. No charges have ever been filed, which really highlights the deeply frustrating, agonizing reality of these unsolved cold cases. So as we look back at the full scope of our explainer today, from the ancient, mournful spirits of Tazamini to the legendary cryptids swimming in the deep lakes, all the way down to the very real, tragic cold cases hidden within the forests and small towns, we see the undeniable duality of Idaho's beautiful but incredibly dangerous terrain. It ensures that while some mysteries may eventually be solved, others are just going to forever remain a part of the wilderness. We dedicate today's explainer to the victims and the families who are still out there waiting for answers. As we close out, I want to leave you with one enduring question to think about. Will this unforgiving, beautiful landscape ever truly give up its dark secrets? Thank you for joining me. Until next time, stay curious and stay focused.